Hi, welcome to part 2 of my review featuring the Weird Frontiers role-playing game. If you haven't seen part 1, please check out the playlist in the description below. This is a Dungeon Crawl Classics based role-playing game with a Weird West setting. In this part we are going to talk about character creation. As with any standard role-playing game, you as the player assume the role of a hero that you create using your imagination and the Weird Frontiers rulebook, of course, rolling your dice to determine different things. However, because this is a Dungeon Crawl Classics based game, you also handle the concept of funnel. You're going to be playing as different player characters. Some of them will survive, others will die. Probably half or more of them, in fact. For those unfamiliar with this funnel mechanic, you basically create usually 4 0 level player characters. A lot of them are going to be quite average, perhaps subpar. You may get lucky and get a few naturally born heroes with high stats, high attributes, but for those that have negative modifiers, it's quite likely that they will be eliminated in the first adventure. But you never know. Sometimes these weaker player characters end up surprising the entire group by surviving against all odds. If they survive, they will be able to transform into one of the 12 character classes. This represents, as mentioned in the fiction of part 1, that the power of the ley lines has touched your player character and now you are some sort of Weird West superhero, so to speak. You also have an alignment system in this role-playing game, but it is handled differently. We will talk about that alignment system, or rather path system, later on in this part of the review. So, you have a total of 10 steps to create your character. Step 1 is rolling 3 6-sided dice to determine the attributes of your player character. You're going to get 6 scores between 3 and 18. This is going to represent your character's mental and physical attributes. Step 2 is assigning each of these scores in order rolled. That is, you do not get to choose the attributes, you need to apply them in order. So if you rolled a 5, a 12, and a 13, that means that your strength, agility, and stamina are going to start out like that. Some scores will be high or low enough to give you a positive or negative modifier that you will apply to different roles and tasks throughout your adventures. Step 3 is determining your hit points. You roll 1d4 for each character and modify the result by any applicable stamina modifier. Then you determine grit. This is step 4. Grit is a new ability created specifically for Weird Frontiers. It simulates the physical and mental stress a character can withstand while facing things best left unseen. Grit is a fluctuating ability determined by adding each character's stamina and personality and dividing it by 2, rounding down. Step 5 is determining whether a character's luck ability is high or low enough to give you a positive or negative modifier. This will make you roll in the lucky sign or birth augur chart. These results will have an impact on your character's performance throughout the game. We will talk more about that later on in this part. Step 6 is rolling on the random occupation chart to determine what sort of career the character had before the adventure starts. In step 7, you determine your character's starting money. In step 8, you're going to determine your crit and fumble dice. When you start as a 0 level character, you use a d14 or a 14-sided die as your fumble die, and you only get a d6 or 6-sided die as your critical hit die. So you're going to be making a lot of mistakes. This represents a typical townsperson that is not particularly capable. So this is a game about zeros to heroes, as many of you know, following the Dungeon Crawl Classics tradition. So you're going to be making a lot of fumbles, a lot of mistakes, and when you actually score a really good hit, it's only going to be a d6. The results of your critical attack or your critical hit are going to be somewhat mediocre. Step 9 is about the path system, which replaces the standard alignment system found in the Dungeon Crawl Classics role-playing game. And in step 10, Weird Frontiers uses 3 methods to avoid danger. This is all about your saving throws: fortitude, reflex, and willpower. We will talk more about that later on. Now, let's go deeper into the details concerning attributes. The 6 attributes help define the characters portrayed during the game. These abilities determine how well a character performs physical and mental actions. High scores will offer a bonus modifier to rolls, while negative modifiers will hinder your attempts at various tasks. Strength is about raw power, where muscle is needed to perhaps lift something up, pull something, strike your enemies with a melee attack, and such related things. Intelligence is all about searching for clues, investigation and reasoning, casting arcane spells, or using skills that require a sharp mind in general. Intelligence modifiers affect mental-based rolls and also determine any additional starting languages a character might begin the game with. When it comes to personality, characters that have a higher personality often become the ambassadors or the face of the group. This attribute represents how mentally tough your character is and how well your character does during social situations, but it also affects willpower saves. Next we have stamina. This is the body's ability to persevere through harsh environmental conditions and shrug off effects such as poison or disease. This positive modifier or negative modifier related to stamina will also affect your fortitude saving throw bonus and your hit points. Agility is all about coordination, jumping, leaping, crouching. This also affects your armor class, your reflex saving throws, and ability skill checks that depend upon a character's quick reflexes. And concerning luck, sometimes a judge will rule that a character's chance to accomplish the task at hand will boil down to how lucky a character is. And remember, in Dungeon Crawl Classics, the Game Master is called the Judge. With a luck check, rolling a d20 to match or roll lower than the character's current luck stat, characters have a chance at tasks they normally find beyond the scope of their skill sets. The luck modifier determines whether a character gains a roll on the lucky sign birth augur chart, and you can spend luck to augment important rolls. However, it's not easy to get back any luck points that you have spent in such a way. During a session, a game master will award luck points based on acts of great sacrifice or great role-playing. Let's talk about some of the results of the lucky sign birth augur chart. Maybe you obtain the result of armadillo hide. You apply your luck modifier to armor class. Maybe you obtain the result of widow's kiss. You apply the modifier, remember this is either a positive or negative modifier, to any poison related saving throws. Maybe you obtain the result of equine charmer. You use the modifier on all horsemanship rolls. Or maybe you obtain the result of holy roller. You apply the modifier to any attempts at practical or magical healing. And these are just some of the many results that you can obtain. Now let's talk about saving throws. During the game, your judge may ask you to attempt a saving throw on behalf of your character during different perilous and hazardous situations. Depending on the situation, you will have to make specific saving throws related to your character's ability to avoid damage or to lessen it. So for example, fortitude is about how well your character shrugs off physical damage, anything related to something that directly affects your body, something that got into your system. Reflex is about avoiding an attack, an explosion, a spell, some negative effect that you can lessen or avoid altogether by moving your body as fast as possible and as accurately as possible, you could say. Next we have willpower. This is your strength of will to resist, charm, sleep, and hypnosis based attacks or effects. Now let's talk about occupations. Every character in the world of Weird Frontiers had a job before they decided to fight against the forces of evil. This occupation determines the character's skill set. Skills related to the character's occupation are attempted by rolling a d20 plus or minus modifiers and compared to the difficulty class of the task. You roll a d10 instead of a d20 when using skills unrelated to a character's occupation. These occupations start with a weapon and a trade good that you can sell or you can use in some creative ways. So maybe you were a photographer. You start with a tripod as a weapon, and your trade good is a camera with 6 plates. Maybe you were a musician. You start with a banjo as a weapon, and your book of sheet music as well. Maybe your character was a showman. You start with throwing knives, and you have stage clothes. Maybe your character was a puppeteer. Your weapon is a wooden puppet, and you have a travel case. Maybe you were a sideshow freak. Your weapon is a barbell, and you start with muscle oil. Maybe your character was a politician. You start with a heavy cane as a weapon, and some money in a fine leather wallet. Maybe your character was a riverboat pilot. You have a staff as a weapon, and a lantern. Maybe you were a cigar maker. You start with a knife as a weapon and a box of fine cigars. And these are just some of the many different professions and occupations that you can get from this table. Then we have information on level advancement. All character classes use the same experience table to determine the level advancement. Each encounter a character survives is worth from 0 to 4 experience points. This is not just about combat. If you find some creative solutions to navigate your way through different perilous situations, this also counts as experience points. All characters that participate in an encounter qualify for the awarded experience points, or XP. Judges always determine the level of XP awarded after each encounter. Characters will level once, reaching the minimum threshold for the next highest level. You'll notice that the threshold increases after each level. This helps campaigns last for some time, allowing players the chance to appreciate their characters as they progress to the higher ranges of experience. Now, when it comes to weapon training, at 0 level, characters all begin the game with a single weapon they are able to use proficiently, by occupation. This means you'll attack by rolling a standard d20 before any modifiers. Characters often find additional weapons during a funnel session, and to keep things simple, you ignore any non-proficiency related modifiers. I think this is great to reflect a character that is equally inept at handling any weapon that he finds. Now let's talk about the alignment system for the Weird Frontiers role-playing game, or rather the Paths system. Weird Frontiers begins in 1865. It's a volatile period that finds the good people of newly formed states and territories struggling to heal both spiritual and physical wounds brought about by the Civil War. Throw in a gaggle of insane cultists that nearly succeeded in unleashing a writhing host of godlike beings intent on devouring mankind, and you have a tumultuous time, a time where everyone chooses a side sooner than later, as the line being drawn in the sand is stained with blood. The Weird Frontiers role-playing game introduces this new alignment system that rewards players for giving some thought to where their character stands on the front between the forces of good and evil. Too often, players choose between the attitudes of lawful, neutral, or chaotic for their characters and then forget about it. This is in other role-playing games. The Paths system aims to change that trend and hopefully add to the overall story elements of a game. You have the walking the line path, which could be seen as neutral. These are just generally decent folks who are not looking to harm anyone, who are trying to survive or get by. They may end up helping someone else if it's not too much of a problem. 0 level characters start in this path. Then you have the path of the righteous. This is someone who is actively seeking to benefit others, or himself if possible. And then you have the damned. These characters could be seen as anti-heroes, according to your perspective. You're willing to attempt many questionable and forbidden things. For the damned, helping innocents isn't entirely out of the question, but you rarely place yourself in danger when there isn't something to be gained. Let's talk about how to use paths during play. Once a character starts an adventure, you make note of their path on a specific section of the character sheet. This section serves as a marker, as a tracker, to keep track of the line that your character is moving through. At the end of each session, players should bring up some of the best highlights of the game. Did any participating characters do something above and beyond that might shift them towards one of the 2 available paths? Think of it like a mock trial, where players take on the role of jurors, while the judge becomes effectively the judge. Should the judge agree that the character has shifted towards one of the paths, that is, you could think that walking the line is the middle ground, the line in the middle of the extremes, then your character would be shifting between righteous and damned. Should the judge agree that the character has shifted towards one of these extremes, The player will fill in the next empty box. Each of these boxes has a modifier. For example, if you are righteous, your character is going to get a positive modifier when dealing with common townsfolk and honest lawmen. If you are on the damned spectrum of things, you're going to get a positive modifier when dealing with the more suspicious or seedier elements in a town, for example, criminals or very shady individuals. Walking the line, that is staying in the middle ground, actually gives you a bonus to any interaction. So mechanically speaking, it's better to stay in the middle ground, that is in the very center of walking the line, without deviating or moving towards righteous or damned. However, this is not always possible. Many of your actions are going to determine the personal development of your player character, so you will probably end up moving towards righteous or damned more often than not. And this concludes this part of the review for today. If you have any comments or questions, please let me know. In the next part we are going to talk about character classes, so I hope you will watch that part as well. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you so much to those of you that have been supporting the channel by sending Drive-Thru RPG gift certificates. If anyone else wants to further support the channel, the information on how to do that will be in the description below. Once again, thank you. I really like the tweaks and modifications applied to this character creation setting so that it feels like a truly Weird West experience that only the Weird Frontiers role-playing game can provide. Once again, thank you and see you later.